Okay, good morning. So I'll make sure everybody can read see the full slide. Okay. So can everybody see the full slide here?
Can see screen, Ken.
Okay, can see the screen? Great. Okay, today we're going to progress with the aversion-rooted cittas. We have finished with the attachment-rooted dosamula cittas, and now we're going to move on to the aversion-rooted cittas. All right, so as you can see here, there are two of them, unprompted and prompted, both of them with ill will, and both of them with unpleasant mental feeling. So that there are number 9 and number 10, unprompted and prompted, with ill will, accompanied by unpleasant mental feeling. Now, unprompted and prompted, what does that mean? Unprompted or prompted has the same meaning as we already discussed for attachment-rooted cittas. So unprompted arises from spontaneous encounter with something disagreeable, leading to impulsive hostility, something that makes you angry all at once. All right, that is unprompted. Prompted, on the other hand, is when there is some trigger causing anger, but it leads to some calculated revenge, something that's been stewing inside the mind for a while. So, just like with attachment-rooted cittas, unprompted citta generates weightier karma than a prompted citta because it is spontaneous and has its energy within, all other things being equal. But the prompted cittas can generate weightier total karma over time because they fester. They continue on and on and on over time. So to give an analogy, an unprompted aversion-rooted citta is like a needle. You feel the pain once. A prompted aversion-rooted citta is like a festering sore where the unpleasant feeling just keeps going on and on and on and on. An unprompted aversion-rooted citta might occur when somebody yells at you on the street. There is an immediate feeling of anger, like how dare they? How dare they yell at me? But the prompted version is like, it might have happened later when you remember the insult and you brood on it, it festers. So anger arises again, but now triggered by a memory. So you just keep going over it again and again and again. So you can see how the first one, like the unprompted, like the needle, can be more intense, but the cumulative effect of the prompted can be stronger and generate more weighty karma. In relationships, unprompted, spontaneous might explode into a heated argument. But in relationships, the prompted could sustain a cold shoulder, continue on a feeling of non-acceptance. See, aversion doesn't have to be so strong. It's any form of non-acceptance that gives the cold shoulder. Prompted is like an immediate allergic reaction where the mind overreacts to a harmless pollen of displeasure. Somebody with hay fever, for example, just a little piece of pollen, the mind just all of a sudden the body reacts to that. Whereas prompted is like delayed hypersensitivity. The initial state fades, but the immune system, the latent tendency, builds antibodies that grudge, manifesting days later as chronic inflammation, or like a mosquito bite. The initial prick of the mosquito wasn't so strong, but what was left behind, the itchiness, goes on for days. So that is the prompted and unprompted. Those are the same as, same concepts as we covered already with the attachment rooted. Any quick questions on that? Yeah.
No, this aversion, right? Can't it be so rationalized like those types, those people that's like medics, right? Those people that enter in the brawl and when they go to like bad things, right? But they feel happy. Especially as serial killer.
Okay, so why is it that somebody with mental problems can do bad things but still feel happy about it? Let's go through an example from that I gave years ago that got to this kind of discussion. There's a hunter. Okay, we're not talking a mental disorder. A hunter who is enjoying hunting for sport, right? They go out, they aim the gun at the prey. They pull the trigger, right? They're happy. They killed an animal. However, aversion rooted citta is non-acceptance. So at the moment before he's pulling the trigger, the hunter did not accept the life of that prey, the fact that that prey was continuing to live. For just that one split moment, there was non-acceptance of the situation where the prey is living. The mind can go back and forth between pleasure, the sport of it, and at that very split second, aversion or non-acceptance of the situation of that prey is alive. I don't like that situation. And that feeling or that citta of non-acceptance of the situation, okay, not happy with that situation, that led to the action of killing, pulling the trigger. He can be happy after, he can be happy before, but at that moment where he's non-accepting. So you don't even need to go into the domain of mentally ill people. The mind instantly flashes between, and we'll talk about that in a moment, in relationships, but the mind can instantly flash between attachment, the pleasant feeling or neutral feeling associated with attachment, and the unpleasant feeling attached with aversion. Okay. Okay. So we've done unprompted and prompted. Now you'll notice that both of them, both of the two chittas, 9 and number 10, are associated with ill will. So what's the difference between aversion and ill will? They're two different Pali words. Aversion rooted dosamula. Dosa is the root. Dosa is translated as aversion. Ill will, patika. All right. Ill will is the active mode in which aversion engages with the object. So when a citta is rooted in aversion, dosa, it doesn't merely register the object with dislike in an abstract sense. It actively opposes, resists, or rejects that object. And that active opposing is what is meant by ill will. That's the patika. And an analogy can help. Dye in a paint is like aversion or dosa. It gives the mixture its color or character. The brush stroke on the canvas is like ill will, patika. It is the actual application or the contact that leaves a mark. Now, without the dye, without the dose, the stroke, the patika, has no color. Without the patika, the stroke, patika, the dye does not meet the canvas. The dye or dosa pervades. The stroke, patika, acts. So dosa pervades the mind. The active aspect of that is ill will. Now let's talk about the feeling. They both arise with unpleasant mental feeling. These are the only cittas that arise with unpleasant mental feeling. Whenever there is unpleasant mental feeling, there is always either citta number 9 or citta number 10 arising. So unpleasant mental feeling only arises in aversion-rooted cittas. And this is different from unpleasant physical feeling. Unpleasant physical feeling it only arises in body consciousness when there is pain. So when I poke myself or step on a knee, let's say I step on a tack, there is a body consciousness that experiences that sensation of stepping on a tack, and it is associated with painful, pleasant feeling that is different from unpleasant mental feeling. Quite different. And there's a sutta that explains this, the Dart Sutta. In the Dart Sutta, the Buddha said that everyone experiences physical pain like sickness or injury, which is like being hit by the first dart. The Arhat only feels that pain. But an ordinary person adds in a second dart at the same spot by getting angry, sad, or worried about it. Aversion-rooted cittas. So they suffer twice. And I can talk about this from the experience of meditation. You're sitting with your legs crossed for an hour. It is quite natural pain, physical pain arises. But the meditator, often pain, cutting off a bit of circulation, nobody dies from this pain, all right? Nobody dies from this, but it can be painful. However, what is important from the meditator's point of view is if you fix on the pain, oh, my leg is hurting, the pain, oh. There is a personalizing of it. You're making it yours. You are taking that physical pain and converting it into a mental pain. What I have found, now I'm certainly not an arhat, but sometimes in meditation, what I have found is that when physical pain arises, the mind does not react with aversion, does not say, oh, I don't like that pain, or why is this happening to me? I better check the mood. It's, oh, that's interesting. That's something that can be examined, explored. And there's two ways of exploring the pain in your leg when you're meditating. The first way is by looking at the pain. Is this a twisting pain? Is it a pulling pain? Is it a hot pain? Is it a sour pain? What kind of pain is this? Examining and exploring and learning about the nature of the pain, putting that pain under a magnifying glass. This isn't making it yours. It's like a scientist exploring it, examining it. It's not, I am in pain. It is, oh, here's the nature of this pain. So that's the first way. You can put it under a magnifying glass. The second way is turn the mirror inwards and say, hey, how is the mind reacting to this pain? Let's look at how the mind is working. Let's look and investigate the citta that is arising right now. You're still exploring, you're still examining, but rather than looking at the nature of the physical pain, you're looking at which is the object, you're now looking at the subject. You're switching around looking at the subject. And both of those, and I'll tell you, pain is a fantastic object because it grabs. It's the mind. It's sometimes hard to stick with an object that's pleasant because the mind will drift and drag, Or neutral is even worse because the mind feels there's nothing to cling on to. But I'll tell you, pain, there's nothing better than pain for grabbing the attention of the mind and observing the nature of the mind with its attention grabbed is, you can really learn a lot about how the mind is reacting, how the mind is responding to that object. So the difference here is normally what happens is an ordinary person gets two darts. When there's a physical pain, they add in a mental pain. physical suffering always leads to mental suffering. However, an arahat, and you don't even have to be an arahat, just a meditator, or even somebody who has got good mindfulness, can take a step back and say, okay, yes, I accept that there is physical pain, but rather than reacting negatively and dwelling on it and commiserating, there is the opportunity to stand back, become a scientist, and put the pain itself under the magnifying glass, or put the mind experiencing the pain under the magnifying glass. So then you don't dwell on the pain. You don't get into that negative spiral of, there's physical pain. I don't like this pain. I don't like this feeling of not liking the pain. Right? So one physical leads to another mental negative, which leads to another mental negative. It spirals and gets worse and worse and worse. Once you take off the I hat and become a scientist exploring what's happening, it goes to a positive. So the Dark Sutta says everyone experiences physical pain. Oh, I'm sorry, I already covered that. Now, there are four types of aversion-rooted chittas. Even though there's only two listed here, they come in there are four categories. With aversion only, aversion together with envy, aversion together with stinginess, and aversion together with remorse. Envy arises when there is non-acceptance of other people's success. I don't like the fact that other people are successful. Somebody's richer than I am. Somebody's got a bigger car than I do. That's envy. I don't accept the reality of that situation. Okay? So the word non-acceptance, rejection, non-acceptance, but now it's towards something, towards other people's success. Stinginess is when there's non-acceptance of sharing with others. I don't want to share. I don't like the idea of sharing with other people. That's stinginess. Remorse is when there is non-acceptance of what you've done before or what you didn't do before. So in all three cases, or in all four cases, aversion only, aversion and envy, aversion and stinginess, aversion and remorse, there is non-acceptance as a key theme running throughout. Aversion, and sometimes it's to the past, sometimes to the present, sometimes to the future. So aversion rooted chitta with past objects can be experienced as regret, remorse, resentment, guilt, bitterness, grudge, shame, indignation, hurt. Aversion rooted chitta with present objects can be experienced as anger, irritation, frustration, annoyance, disgust, hostility, patience, agitation, dislike. Aversion-rooted chitta with future objects can be experienced as fear, anxiety, worry, dread, apprehension, pessimism, panic, foreboding, reluctance. Now, on this slide, I counted them up, there's 27 different words here for aversion. If I had made the font a little smaller and gone to my thesaurus, I'm sure I can get 50 different words that all are different forms of aversion. But from the Abhudhamma, and they're all different. They're all different because they have different words for them. But what this shows is that the Abhudhamma, in its characterization, in its classification system, doesn't focus on past, present, future. It doesn't focus on the nature of the object. Okay, it just classifies it as either how the mind reacts, either prompted or unprompted, and the feeling that's associated with it. So this gives a bit of an idea that even though there's only two aversion-rooted chittas, there's probably 50 or more words that can be used to describe them in different contexts. But from the Abhudhamma point of view, those contexts are not what's important. It is how the mind is reacting right now. So let's say I am meditating and there's a pain in the leg. There can be aversion toward that pain. Or I'm meditating and I'm not happy with how my meditation is going. That's also aversion rooted, right? Different types of objects, but the mind is still unpleasant feeling, non-acceptance with ill will toward what the object that is being experienced. So these are all just different ways of opposing, resisting, rejecting the past, present, or future. Here's the one that I'm sometimes asked about. Is boredom aversion rooted? And the answer is sometimes. When boredom involves a subtle pushing away of the present object, then it's aversion rooted, like fed up, irritated, disengagement. This is unpleasant, I don't want it. But sometimes boredom is closer to delusion when it presents a dullness, mental blankness, blur, lack of interest without resistance. So depending on how the mind is operating, if it's non-accepting of what's happening, if boredom is non-accepting of what is happening, then that is with aversion. However, if the boredom is just simply blur, not engaging with what is happening, then it's delusion rooted. Okay. Another thing I'm often asked about is looking at depression. It's also sometimes aversion rooted. When depression involves a painful, resistant attitude toward experience, it can correspond to aversion with citta, like rejecting what may come, present, or past-oriented dislike of oneself, sinking reaction to current conditions. This is where you feel, oh, not worth it, things are wrong. That's non-acceptance. Then depression is aversion rooted. But in many cases, what's called depression is actually closer to delusion, especially when there's dullness or heaviness, lack of clarity, indifference without active resistance. So if the mind is just, again, a blur type of depression, not engaging, then what we call depression would categorize under delusion rooted. And this can be important because we're looking at the antidote. But before we get to the antidotes, research shows that voting is strongly shaped by emotion, especially aversion-based emotions, because they're the strongest, like fear, anger, sadness, and despair. Politicians know this very well. You'll notice how political campaigns very often are built on fear, exclusion. Oh, they're different. That group is different from us. All right. News outlets and social media platforms use the same principle, pushing emotionally charged content, the clickbait, that make us vote with our attention. All right, so that we pay attention, we click on that because the headline, the title, makes us, impacts us with a strong emotion. In fact, I remember doing a study, this back when I was working with large groups. We asked them to prioritize their initiatives based on two axes, how bad they currently are and how much it will impact their organization. So each of the people in the room had to place each issue on that matrix of measuring it against how bad it currently is and how much it would impact their organization. Then later, we asked them to vote what they thought were the top three. And what we found is that when people placed on a two-dimensional axis, on two axes, the highest of importance and effectiveness, you would think that the top ones that came out of that are the ones that had the biggest impact and or currently done most poorly. So that group should have been the top priority. But when they voted, those weren't the ones that got the main votes. What that showed is that when you are placing something on two axes, you're using the thinking part of your brain. Okay, this is the logical left side of the brain. When you are voting, you're using the emotional side of the brain. Okay, so the way the emotional side of the brain works and the way the thinking part of the brain works are very different, or often very different. Sometimes they align, but often they do not. Okay, so that's why political parties with really good policy papers and everything, they don't necessarily do very well. It's the ones that vote that get the emotional side, because voting is an emotional thing. So the answer to that was, at least when I was working as a consultant in this environment, was you've got to address both the logical side and the emotional side at one, maybe through slightly different initiatives, but you've got to address both. Mindful observation of aversion is like watching a fireworks display in slow motion. There's an explosion of aversion. Oh, the pain in my leg. It's a very clear, a lot of information there. It's very vivid. But equanimity reveals it as empty, conditioned, and prior ignorance. It's simply an event. It doesn't have any lasting impression. Over time, this weakens the latent tendency of aversion, transforming the mind from a battlefield where one is engaging with the object of aversion into a mirror where one is observing the object of aversion or observing the mind experiencing the object of aversion. So when noting aversion, it's important not to have aversion to the aversion itself. Like, I want this aversion to go away. When there is awareness of, oh, there is aversion to the pain arising right now, don't get angry at yourself. Take that itself as the object of meditation. Adding aversion to a layer of aversion just adds extra layers of aversion. In the Dhammapada, it said, hatreds are never appeased by hatred in this world. By non-hatred alone are they appeased. This is an eternal law. So what this means is that aversion-rooted chittas are never resolved by hatred. By non-hatred alone are they appeased. Non-hatred includes metta, loving-kindness meditation, patience, forgiveness, acceptance. That is how one deals with aversion. So, when there is pain, acknowledge there is pain. Gentle acceptance and acknowledgement is the correct way of dealing with the pain. Yeah.
So by accepting and acknowledge the pain, pain is from physical, isn't it?
Yeah.
So by accepting the knowledge, will pain actually goes away? Or is it the mind is so powerful that it makes it disappear? How
Okay.
does that work?
If your intention is, oh, I'm going to note this pain so it goes away, there's really aversion behind that. You don't accept the pain. All right. So you are the mind is very sneaky. The mind is saying, hey, I'm going to note this and then it'll go away, right? No, all you're doing is saying, I don't like this pain, I don't accept this pain, I want to use this pain, I want to use this noting strategy. It has to be genuine. There has to be a genuine from your heart desire to observe the pain without any background non-acceptance of the pain. Because what happens is the pain that is happening, the physical pain causes mental pain, that causes more mental pain, more mental pain, more mental pain, non-acceptance, and just spirals and spirals and spirals, out of control. However, when there is mindfulness, which is wholesome, true mindfulness, that breaks the spinning, that breaks that pattern of dwelling on the pain, and now it is observing the mind or putting that pain under a magnifying glass. This stops the negative cycle that's spinning and interrupts it. Maybe initially it only interrupts it momentarily. So what do? Observe again. The more observations, the more mindfulness that is applied, because mindfulness is always wholesome, the more interruption. So it will not change the fact that if you you step on a nail, yeah, that nail will continue to generate pain. The physical pain will still be there, but the mental pain can be addressed. You stop the physical pain by lifting your foot off the nail, taking the thumbtack out of the nail, right? But that's just dealing with the physical pain. The mental pain is stopped by interrupting the flow, the circular fixation on negativity by inserting mindfulness and blocking the spinning of the mind.
By sitting for a long time.
Yep.
Is that in the physical pain?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, when you sit a long time,
Yeah.
the blood can get cut off, there can be a physical pain.
If we know aversion, everything,
Mhm.
that pain would go away. Will it go away? What actually
It doesn't
happened?
matter, it's an object.
So what actually happened? Or if you don't have aversion, you keep working it. There are 2 ways of looking at it.
Okay,
Actually, does it actually disappear or is it your mind?
my experience is it does disappear.
It does.
It does disappear.
Actually,
Now,
it
sorry,
actually does.
I want to differentiate between, okay, my wife has hurt her leg,
Yeah.
right? There's a physical injury to her leg. If she sits cross-legged, physical pain arises. This is not meditation pain.
Yes.
This is because the bones and the nerves, this is real medical pain. Okay, that will not go away. Meditation pain will go away, but not that pain. Okay, so she, when she meditates now, she meditates on a chair, all right, because she can't sit cross-legged. That physical pain will not go away, but the mental pain the medication pain will go away. That's been my experience. It does go away because something else becomes prominent, and it may still be over there. Okay, fine, there's still some physical pain over there, but the mind's actually paying more attention now to the rising, falling, or whatever else is the primary object at that time.
So it's still there, but it no longer bother you.
Oh, it doesn't bother you, right?
For some other
Right.
things.
Bother is non-acceptance, right? The word bother means non-acceptance of it, right? You no longer feel aversion toward that pain. Normally, I like it when meditation pain comes because it is a fantastic object. It really grabs the attention. Okay, now we're all going to get. I remember when my wife had one of her first retreats, she was feeling a lot of this meditation pain. She went to the teacher and was talking about this, and the teacher said, think of this pain that you're experiencing now like a dress rehearsal for your last thought moment. It's possible your last thought moment, there will be pain, right? Now, if you get wrapped up in commiserating and this non-acceptance of it, there's just going to be a lot of negativity at that time, which at the last thought moment could drive you to a woeful state. However, if there is a habit of observing that physical pain, that meditation pain, right? Then in the last thought moment, when there is a physical pain, some physical pain, the mind can naturally turn into a detective, into a scientist, rather into a complainer, right? The complainer is one who's just letting more negative and more aversion on top of aversion, heaping aversion on aversion. The scientist or the reporter is turning it into a subject of intense scrutiny. And that can be the difference between rebirth in a woeful state or in a human, even data realm.
Good strategy.
Good strategy, yes, and it really stuck with my wife. This was like 25, 30 years ago, and she still remembers that when there is physical pain. Now, this is not to say that, sure, she knows she wants to build up mindfulness and concentration, and that physical pain will get in the way because of how she damaged her knee. So she sits on a chair to avoid the physical pain and build up now there's still the mental pain that she has to deal with, the meditation pain, but it's very different from the physical pain. Okay. Now here's another citta. There was a particular Brahmin who came to the Buddha and insulted him and criticized him, and the Buddha remained perfectly calm. Perfectly calm. And the Brahmin asked, how can you remain calm when I'm being so aggressive and insulting to you? The Buddha said, if someone comes to your house and offers you a gift, but you decline the gift, you do not accept the gift, who does the gift belong to? And the Brahmin said, well, it belongs to me, because the person who brought it. And the Buddha said, well, I do not accept your gift of those insults and those negative words. They stick with you. All right. So the Buddha said that calm stays calm when a man insults him, explaining that anger is like a gift that doesn't have to be accepted. Somebody can insult you, but you don't have to be insulted. Somebody can insult you, but you don't have to feel insulted. So seeing this, the man became ashamed and realized that hostility only harms the one who carries it. In the commentary, they talk about anger as being like a red hot stone. You pick it up to throw it at someone, guarantee you hurt your own hand first. You may not be able to throw it or even hit that person. They may not feel anything, but guaranteed your hand is going to get burned. That is the nature of anger. So when there is anger, be aware that you're hurting yourself first, you're hurting yourself more, you're not hurting the other, you may not even land a blow on the other person. So in the practice of Vipassana, the objective is to move from being the victim to being the observer of aversion. So in other words, when pain arises, you're not the victim of pain anymore, you're the observer of pain. So this shift in perspective can be achieved by deconstructing the apparent solid mass of anger. So it's not, I am so angry. You break it into those contact, sensation, perception, reaction, all the different components of what's going on inside the mind. So rather than when there's physical pain, meditation pain, reacting with aversion, I talked about two different types of scientists or reporters. The first looks at the nature of the pain itself, the twisting, the turning, the pulling, the hot, sour pain. The other one is looking at the mind. Here, looking at what's going on in the mind, the contact that's going on in the mind. The mind is connecting with this. It's a very strong connection. Pain really grabs attention. The sensation, the true experience of the pain, the perception, the association with the different ways, the nature of the pain inside the mind, and seeing how the mind is reacting to the pain, that becomes the object of meditation. Okay. Now let's just zoom out a little bit. We're typically focused on individual mind states, but it's also in collective forms. Prejudice, discrimination, and violence, that's what happens when aversion arises at a whole country level or a group level. So the cultivation of metta and compassion is not only a personal practice, but important for society. What happened when we have aversion toward a loved one? What is actually happening at the citta level? Now, the common experience of mixed, conflicting, or rapidly oscillating emotions towards the same person or object raises the question: can attachment and aversion rooted chittas arise simultaneously toward the same object? No. Each counter-creating citta arises, stands, and falls as a discrete mental event. Within a single citta, only one unwholesome root can dominate. A single citta is either attachment rooted, aversion rooted, or delusion rooted. The three cannot arise. Attachment and aversion cannot arise together. And we talked about that earlier when we talked about the hunter, right? For one split second, the mind switched from attachment, just enjoying the time hunting, to non-acceptance, rejection of that prey being, or the target being alive and wanting to stop that life, and then back to celebrating, oh, I got a good kill. So same thing in a relationship. My wife loves me, but not all the time. Sometimes she gets angry at me. That doesn't mean at that very moment that she's angry at me, she doesn't love me. But when she's not angry at me, she does love me. All right. So this is the idea of aversion and attachment can alternate very quickly. It's not, when you look at it at a momentary citta by citta point of view. Why is remorse classified as an aversion-rooted citta vasika, even when it arises in response to genuine wrongdoing? In other words, I've done something wrong in the past. I feel badly about it. Okay? How come that's not wholesome? You would think that's good, right? Well, many people believe that remorse over past unskillful actions is not only understandable, but morally appropriate, perhaps even necessary for ethical sensitivity. In remorse, the characteristic of ill will is present. The mind pushes against its own past, resists what's already occurred, cannot accept the conditioning fact of those actions having arisen. So here, it's more about the mind saying, I don't accept that I did that. And that is aversion. However, can that aversion give rise to wholesome? Yes, it can. It can initiate feelings of conscience, all right, wanting to caring about my own self, fear of wrongdoing, caring about karma. So this remorse can lead to wholesome states of fear of wrongdoing and moral dread or conscience. But the actual remorse itself, it is a rejecting, it is a non-acceptance of what has happened in the past. Here's an interesting one. I'll give a bit of a story. Many years ago, I was talking with another Dhamma speaker. And this other Dhamma speaker said, oh, I don't believe in the Abhudhamma. He's a meditator, a serious meditator. And I said, why don't you believe in the Abhudhamma? This meditator, Dhamma speaker, said, is it true that all wholesome mental states have pleasant or neutral feeling? I said, yes. That's what the Abhudhamma says. He said, well, I was doing deep meditation, and there was this very strong negative feeling. There was terror, fear, misery, disgust. And that cannot be wholesome. My teacher said that my terror, fear, misery, disgust was part of my meditation. So therefore, the Abhudhamma is wrong. Now he did not, my analysis of that situation was he did not want to hear the truth. He just wanted to state his position. So I kept quiet. But I'm going to share with you now, because it is true. There are states of meditation called the dukkha jnanas, the suffering knowledges, the knowledges of suffering, where the mind recognizes terror, fear, misery, and disgust. So here's what happens. You start meditating and put away the concepts and the labels. You come to the ultimate realities. Then there is awareness of the rising of each ultimate reality and arising in existence of the ultimate reality. Then that is the observation of conditionality. Then there is the observation of the arising, the existence, and falling away of the ultimate reality. This is when impermanence is first, at a conceptual level, first experienced. Then there's the experience of just changes. I've gone through these insight knowledges before, but just changes, just arising and falling away, no existence. Then there's Vangha, the insight knowledge number 5, of where there is just awareness of falling away, dissolution, constant falling away and non-existence. When the mind continues to focus on this continuous falling away, there is a knowledge of terror, knowledge of misery, knowledge of disgust. I want to explain that. Recognizing that conditioned phenomena are terrifying, miserable, and disgusting does not mean that the mind experiences terror, misery, or disgust. So, what happens is, these are fairly high meditative states. When the mind is experiencing constant dissolution, like there's absolutely nothing to put a foothold on. There's no foundation anymore. There is no permanence, nothing to hang your hat on, nothing there. That is like recognizing that this is a terrifying situation. It's not feeling terror, but it's recognizing that this is a terrifying situation. And it becomes even more intense, whereas, hey, this is a miserable situation. You're not feeling misery, but it's a recognition that this is a miserable situation. This is disgusting. I want to get away from this. Okay? This is a recognition that this state is disgusting. So it's like walking along and seeing a pit of excrement. You're not in the pit of excrement, but it's recognizing that this pit of excrement is terrifying, miserable, and disgusting. But you're not actually in it. However, remember how the mind changed every billionths of times a second? If the mindfulness is not continuous, watching that terrifying, miserable, disgusting experience, knowing that it is terrifying, miserable, and disgusting, it's so easy if the mindfulness is not strong for 1 millisecond to experience that. And then the mind becomes, because the mindfulness is not 100% continuous, then the mind does experience terror, misery, disgust, and those are aversion root chittas. So the mind is alternating between high levels of meditative states and strong, visceral, emotional, unpleasant feeling. So it is possible that that Dhamma speaker and meditator was experiencing the higher levels of dukkha jnana, dukkha knowledge, but his mindfulness at that time was not 100% constant. And there was a break that allowed aversion or citta to come in. Right? Now, what comes after this is after this terror, recognizing that this impermanence, this constant dissolution is terrifying, miserable, and disgusting, is equanimity. In other words, there is just yeah, that's the way it is. Okay, you're not feeling aversion towards it. You're recognizing it. That is the way it is, and that Sankara Pekanyana is the state just before enlightenment happens. I'll give you an idea how high up this is. The first noble truth is the noble truth of suffering. There's no way that you can get to Sotapanna without coming face to face with suffering. And that's what this is, face to face with suffering. Suffering is Sankara Pekanyana, the Sankara Dukkha, which is the suffering that is inherent in the nature of conditioned phenomena, constantly falling away, constantly non-existing. So, if mindfulness is not continuous, these experiences will arise with unpleasant mental feeling. When this happens, the meditator should return to noting and reestablish the wholesome noting cittas. So the answer what I should have said, or maybe that's what his teacher said, is don't worry about that. Just focus, just go back to your mindfulness, and you'll get over that stage. You'll get over it. But some people get caught in that stage of the dukkhañanas, the suffering, face to face with suffering, and they just get stuck there for a while. Some people get through it quite quickly. Yeah.
Does the dukkha and or the unexperienced coming from the past karma or experience from the past will come back?
Okay. The dukkhañana does not come from the past, karma. It's not from karma. Dukkhañana, the experience of recognizing that what you're observing is terrifying, miserable, and disgusting, comes from truly understanding the nature of conditioned phenomena. Conditioned phenomena being something that is always falling away, impermanent, always falling away. So much of our life, our way of thinking is built around this illusion of permanence. We think, I'm going to be the same person tomorrow. We think, oh, that's the same person I met earlier. This is an illusion of permanence. When direct face-to-face experience through Bhanganyana, the fifth insight knowledge, shows that everything is conditioned, just falls away constantly. Nothing is there. Nothing is permanent. Nothing is no foundation, nothing to hold on. This is a terrifying, miserable, disgusting experience. And recognizing it, that is the dukkhañanas. Slipping into it and feeling the terror, misery, or disgust, that is when you're battling the aversion or cittas. That's when there's no mindfulness. But when there's true mindfulness, there is the awareness of, hey, the first noble truth, the noble truth of suffering, it's true. You experience it firsthand, directly. I mean, I can tell you the first noble truth of suffering, right? That the world is suffering. And you think, oh, that's because, oh, I hit my toe, it's painful. Yeah, that's one kind of suffering, right? That's called dukkha. Then there's viparana dukkha, which is the suffering that comes from separation. Oh, I miss my kids. That's suffering. Okay? I'm always going to be missing things that I once had. Okay, that's viparana dukkha. That's another type of suffering. But the real, fundamental, existential, meaning part of existence type of suffering, is the conditioned phenomenon. Everything is not permanent. Everything is not self. No control over anything. It is all suffering. That is the deepest form of suffering. That's the first noble truth. Coming face to face with that is the in meditation. That is what leads to the dukkha jnanas. Okay. Yep.
So when these people, the high level kind of meditator, they can even feel terrifying and miserable and disgusting with this condition, is it? Can it be the other way around, in the sense that it's not terrifying, not miserable, and not disgusting?
Okay. If there's true insight or the inside knowledge, right? That inside knowledge,
So no.
it's gonna happen. You're gonna recognize it. You may not get caught up in the negativity of it. Okay. Some people zip through this very quickly. In a single sitting, they zip through the terror, misery, disgust, zip right through, get through Sankarapaka Jnana. But most people, because it is so counterintuitive, it's so visceral, based on the what you've all built your world around, a permanence, it hits hard. And so one thing to recognize it, the other thing is to avoid it, right?
To me, we are ingrained.
It's ingrained.
So-
It's ingrained. It's gonna happen. It's going to happen.
The other question that
Yeah.
you see the speaker, without accepting Abhudhamma,
Mhm.
then is it possible you will ultimately get
Absolutely.
destination?
Sure.
Possible.
Sure, you don't need Abhidhamma to go through the insight knowledges. It's not required. It just gives you a roadmap and a guide, makes it much I mean, it's like, hey, if I told you to go from here to Ipoh and there were no map, no street signs, could you make it? Well, yeah. Theoretically, you might eventually make your way from here to Ipoh, right? But if I say go from here to Ipoh and I say here's the GPS and here's a, with all the map, oh, okay, well, I gotta turn right, okay, 50 meters turn left. All right, it's gonna be so much easier.
So workbook is a guideline.
It's a workbook, it's a guideline, yes.
So you make the method almost easy.
Makes the path easier.
Yeah.
If you look at it, many people don't even look at it. They study the Abhidhamma as theory only and don't apply it to their practice. And that's like having the GPS in your pocket, but not looking at it.
The best part is that people are highly, an insight. Why don't they understand there is such program as
Okay.
GPS?
Because what happened,
you?
that particular individual, he had only understood the Abhidhamma at a very superficial level. He only understood, he started with asking me, is it true that all the wholesome states, it's only pleasant or neutral feeling? That's a very superficial aspect of the Abhidhamma. I said, yes, that's true. And he said, I was doing deep meditation, and I experienced very strong, unpleasant feeling. So therefore the Abhidhamma must be wrong.
So without that, he can
Yes.
he can ultimately, if he do it right,
Okay,
also
well-
reach the same destination.
His teacher would have told him, don't worry about that stuff. Don't get caught up in that worries about your doubts about the Abhidhamma. Just meditate.
This is
Just
about-
meditate better. And with more mindfulness and more continuous mindfulness, wholesome noted cheetahs, he could get through. Yes.
The real fact that he does it mean that he has a aversion?
Oh, yes.
He has a aversion.
Well, he was at that moment when he was experiencing terror, misery, and disgust, there was aversion. All right, how does vipassana noting weaken aversion rooted chittas? Vipassana noting weakens aversion rooted chittas by changing the mind's relationship to unpleasant experience. When a pleasant, painful feeling, an irritating sound, or unwanted thought, or an awkward bodily sensation is noted as hearing, pain, thinking, tightening, the mind is no longer fused with the object. Right? You're no longer the victim, now the observer. Right? Mindfulness keeps the object in view, and wisdom begins to see it as a conditioned phenomenon not I, me, or mine. In other words, this is something that arises for a moment, exists, and falls away. Observing pain, that sitting observing with my legs crossed, pain arises, observing that it's the tightness, the twisting, the hardness, sourness, and then seeing how that tightness arises only for a fraction of a second and then falls away, replaced by perhaps another tightness, or perhaps replaced by hardness, whatever the experience is at that moment, and seeing the momentary aspect of it, that is seeing it as conditioned phenomena. So turning attention from the story to the bare experience. The bare experience is either the bare experience of the sensate, the object, or the bare experience of the mind, weakens the usual reflex of contact, feeling, aversion, proliferation. So, going back to our two chicas, number 9, number 10. Number 9 was the spontaneous anger. Number 10 is deliberate resentment. And going back to our example of the person at the buffet, the person immediately feels irritated. This is annoying. Why are they taking so much? It's never enough for me. That is rejection, hostility, spontaneous anger. The other aspect of prompted is hearing somebody else complain or reflecting. This person thinks, yeah, it's unfair. Their being really bothers me. If you remember what I did after that, is I said, okay, what does it say in the cittas and commentary as the remedy for spontaneous anger? If you're a person who has spontaneous anger, metta meditation is the right answer. And reflection on the universality of suffering. Reflecting that everybody suffers. When somebody is upset, they've got dosamula citta, they've got aversion rooted citta in their mind. They're suffering at that moment. So when my wife gets angry at me, I am reflecting, and this is true, she is suffering right now. She is experiencing pain right now. And there's a feeling of compassion. I want to relieve that pain. I want to lessen that pain. Okay, so I know that suffering is everywhere. Whenever I see aversion, there is suffering behind it. Deliberate resentment is where you're stewing on things. Karuna and reflection, forgiveness reflections, contemplation on the calm ownership. Okay. All unwholesome chittas have universal chittas of contact, feeling, perception, volition, one point in this mental life, faculty, and attention. These are chittasikas that arise in every single chitta. All aversion-rooted chittas have the occasional chittasikas of initial sustained applications, decision, energy, wish to do. We've gone through many of them. Delusion, shamelessness, wrongdoing, fearless, wrongdoing, and restlessness. We talked about those. These chittas both have aversion. They both have, they're prompted as sloth and torpor. Envy, stinginess, remorse. Sometimes there's 4 options, as we've gone through. Okay. Last slide for today. Why are envy, stinginess, and remorse mutually exclusive? Imagine a single doorway that can be guarded by only one person at a time. Envy is like a guard who stands at the door looking outwards, looking at what's outside. At others, upset that they possess something they desire. Now, how come they've got a better car, they've got more money than I do? Stinginess is a guard looking inward to protect what's inside. I don't want to let any my stuff out. I don't want to share anything that I've got. This is mine, I'm not going to share it. Remorse is like a guard who's facing backward, preoccupied with what's already happened. I shouldn't have done this, or I failed to do that. So only one guard can stand at the doorway at one time. The mind is fixated on what others have outward. Then, in other words, they've got envy. They cannot be simultaneously clutching at its own possessions. If it's protecting what it has and it's looking inward, it's not at that moment regretting past actions. If it's replaying the past of worry, in other words, remorse, it's not attending to others' success or guarding possessions. Okay. The next class, we're gonna start going into doubt.
The sense that envy, sickness, and remorse cannot be together.
Correct.
So at least you only have one wholesome.
No, what can happen, okay,
One unwholesome only. You cannot have three together.
you either have aversion or aversion stinginess, or aversion and remorse.
You don't.
Those are the four
You
options.
cannot have aversion, envy, sickness, and remorse.
You cannot have them together. Envy, stinginess, and remorse are mutually exclusive because the guard is looking inward, outward, or backward. One of the three. You can't be looking at all three directions, multiple directions at once.
The first one is aversion.
Aversion, that's just plain aversion where yeah, it's like that pain on my knee, right? That's aversion, but it's not envy, stinginess, or remorse.
Doesn't go.
It's not one of those, it doesn't have a guard.
No additional.
Right, no additional favor.
Okay, go back to the last slide. So on this slide, it means that in that particular form of right, person and I, stingy and envy that are just together.
Correct. The mind is either stingy at that time, or envious, or remorseful, or none. You cannot have stinginess and envy at the same time. Because envy is looking outside at what somebody else has. Stinginess is looking inside of what I've got, not wanting to share. And remorse is regretting what was done or not done. 1 millisecond later, it can switch. It can switch between, hey, I wish I had that, but I'm not gonna give away anything I have, so that maybe tomorrow I can have more.
Can switch because just now I was thinking you can get jealous and the system they're stingy.
Right,
Switch at different moment.
right. Okay, I saw that there's a raised hand. Michael, yes.
Yeah, Rob, thanks for the lecture. So 2 questions. To this slide, what about if one is afraid, like worry? So not backward, but forward. How would this fit?
If one is afraid,
If one is afraid, like looking forward, not backward, and one is worried.
Okay. Fear is an example of aversion by itself, but a particular type of aversion where there is non-acceptance of the future. Worry is another example of the aversion towards the future, because there is this idea that this might happen and there is a non-acceptance. So fear and worry are both aversion by itself in this categorization. Fear and worry do not involve at that moment envy, stinginess, or remorse. Okay?
Okay.
Next
So
question.
the next question was on 2 slides before when you were talking about the Vipassana noticing. On page 34. 34. Yes. So here it seems like when you talk about the mindfulness, so as it keeps the object in view, so it's as if the mindfulness wraps is a superstructure which looks a little bit what is happening in the mind stream and not attaching to it. And on the other hand, as the mind clears up, naturally mindfulness becomes stronger. So then seen from this understanding, it's not a superstructure, it's like naturally there. So I wonder how these 2 things go together.
Okay. If there is mindfulness, then it is wholesome. The mind is wholesome. There cannot be mindfulness together with aversion. There cannot, at that same moment, there cannot be mindfulness, at the moment there is attachment. It cannot be. There can be mindfulness, there can be aversion in one moment, and then the next moment to that, there is mindfulness. And that mindfulness can take as its object the aversion that just happened. Or it can take as that object the source of aversion, the pain in my knee. So I am sitting, meditating, a pain arises in the knee. Mindfulness is not at that moment when there is the awareness of pain, because physical pain, the awareness of the pain is going to have aversion. Then at the next moment, there is mindfulness reflecting back on either the experience of pain, it's a stretching pain, it's a tight pain, whatever type of pain it is, or there is mindfulness of, oh, the mind that just arose was with aversion. I noticed how it was pulling back when the mind observes the previous mind moment as pulling back. The mindful mind is observing an aversion mind because of the pulling back characteristic or aspect of that mind that is experiencing aversion. Okay, does that help?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. So, any other questions?
One last question. Me, in layman, that's right. But where do if a person is very stingy,
Yeah.
is it that that person will always be a very high level of jealousy? I mean, the worry actually what influence the behavior. If a person is very stingy, does it mean that that person is always tends to be very jealous or very envy of so-called people?
Okay. If there is a person who has a tendency, a habit to stinginess,
Yeah.
does that person also likely have a habit towards envy?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, both stinginess and envy build upon aversion, non-acceptance as a root. Okay. You can think of them as being negative-minded people, right? They're both negative-minded people. There's some people who are negative, I mean, just see all those things in a negative way. So the stingy person sees things in a negative way of not wanting to share. The envious person sees things in a negative way of what other people have. All right. So yes, a person with a strong tendency towards stinginess has a negative mind, and that negative mind will make envy, remorse, and plain aversion more readily arising. Okay, so yes, they tend to go together. Get at the root. Get at the root. Acceptance, metta, patience, okay, forgiveness. Looking at the where was it here? So, meditation, reflection on the universality of suffering, karuna, forgiveness, contemplation of karma ownership. Those are from the suttas and from the commentary as ways of addressing all forms of negative mind, all forms of aversion. Okay, so helping out, practicing metta every morning, practicing karuna every morning, reflection that, hey, look, everyone's suffering. Now, I tell you that idea of, as I mentioned earlier, when my wife gets mad at me, rather than reacting, saying, hey, don't blame me, blah, 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 I'm not reacting to it, and that's just throwing fuel on the fire, right? Instead, there is this very strong, built up over a long time, feeling of, she is suffering. I don't want my wife to suffer. I don't like it when my wife is suffering. That cools the fire. So my reaction becomes not so inflammatory when my wife is angry at me. All right, so those are ways of dealing with the true root, which is the dosa, aversion.
So how do these remedies come naturally?
Practice.
It's only very frequent.
Whoa.
Subject, if there's no subject, you do times to practice. Is it true?
Suffering is universal. All right, it doesn't have to be just my wife scolding me. Anything. I use that as a real life example, but there are, I mean, one can see that there is suffering, aversion.
The other final question.
Yeah.
Put things in perspective. Metta Karuna, normally you do it to individual, to individual or to a group of people. Can you actually have metta to the whole world? Metta to reduce suffering in the whole world?
All right, it starts with metta. You're supposed to start with yourself.
Yes.
Okay, then you pick a person for whom it's easy for you to feel loving kindness. There's a particular monk that I visualize and that feeling comes. Okay, then you start to spread out. I go to my family and I go broader and broader. But after a certain point, the feeling of loving kindness starts to dominate the particular object of loving kindness. And that loving kindness itself is just universal, global, illimitable. It goes to all beings. So you start building it up with people for whom it's easy. And then a little bit more difficult, but as it builds up momentum, as the metta builds up momentum, it becomes truly, it takes on a life force of its own and radiates out in all directions to all beings. Because it's not possible to visualize all beings, right? It just becomes a feeling of just, may all be well and happy.
So that means, of course, for your own spiritual cultivation is good.
Yes.
But does your metta meditation resulted in those all beings
Okay.
also have that kind of effect?
Does it impact the others?
Yes, because the world is getting worse and worse.
The world is getting worse. Yes.
You know, not metta,
Right.
kind of things. So
How does it work? Okay.
How does it work?
I remember sitting a few decades ago downstairs, D.H. Henry Hall. A monk was giving a talk on metta. At the end of the talk, a lady asked a question. She said, there's a difficult coworker at work. I keep radiating metta. They haven't changed.
Yeah.
What do I do? And the monk said, the metta is for you, not for them. It's meant to it's meant to adjust your mind. Now, if that lady were to truly develop metta in her own mind and it became part of her, then the way in which she reacts to others, works with others, will be different. She will have less aversion, right, in her own mind, and that is going to impact others. It's not like it's a psychic wave that goes into somebody else's life.
Indirect benefit.
There is indirect benefit. That's for, okay, that is for a living person. However, for devas, when one is radiating metta, it's like a parent watching over a child. When you see your child doing well, doing something that's good, the parent feels good, right? So when we are radiating metta to others and actively developing ourselves spiritually, our guardian devas are observing this, guardian devas have the ability to impact other people's thinking when those other people are susceptible. Okay, I remember years ago when my teenage son was behaving like a teenager. It was his nature. And went to a monk and said, "What do I do?" Oh, make radiate method to your guardian devas. I said, "How will that happen?" Said, when your son is sleeping or just about to wake up, guardian deva can influence his thinking and straighten out some of those teenage thoughts. Okay, and I don't know whether I can. I mean, he turned out fine. So I don't know whether it was the method or not, but that's the way it was explained to me.
So everything is indirect, I would say.
Yes, it's not direct.
Of course, the immediate benefit is yourself.
Immediate benefits yourself, there might be an indirect benefit
Yeah.
through guardian devas,
With
yes.
yourself, then
It can spread out, yes.
Because there's always a misconception that we have maybe we mess up that we don't mean it affects everyone, so everyone will become good, that kind of world will become.
It can help through guardian devas, and I personally believe guardian devas have a very strong effect, very powerful effect on conditions around me. Okay, if somebody could read the bit over time, that's not expected. If somebody could read the reflection. Sorry.
Let us recall to our mind this morning, come to the temple with the sole purpose to study the Dhamma. With good faith, sadhana, and wise attention study, we learn and understand some of the Lord Buddha's teaching. Whenever there is any doubt or wrong understanding of the teaching, we seek to clear our doubts and straighten our views. With a proper understanding of the Dhamma, we can now put it into practice. The right understanding of the Dhamma will produce right thoughts that, in turn, give rise to right action, right speech, and right livelihood. With such a right frame of mind, we can face the realities of life. May the merits punya be gained through listening to the Dhamma, discussing on the Dhamma, and strengthening our views, help us in overcoming any difficulties we may face. May all beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty powers, rejoice in these merits we have acquired, and may they long protect the Buddha Sasana. May this merit be a contributing cause for the realization of Nibbana. Idam min punya, Nibbana sa pacayo hotu. Sadhu, sadhu,
Sadhu.
Three sadhus to our teachers.
Sadhu.
Okay.